They say Sammy Davis Jr. died on May 16, 1990. The obituaries will tell you that throat cancer took his voice and then his life at the age of 64. But the people who truly knew him understood something the newspapers never printed. The real Sammy Davis Jr. died on November 19, 1954, on a highway in California. What came back from that hospital bed was something else entirely. Something harder. Something that had learned to see in the dark. When the ambulance arrived that morning, the paramedics saw what America always saw first. A black man. Bleeding. Broken. Nobody. Not a star. Not one of the most talented performers in America. Just another body on a stretcher. They took him to San Bernardino County Hospital. The hospital for the poor. The hospital for the forgotten. The hospital where black patients were sent because the other hospitals were for white people only. Sammy Davis Jr. lay on a gurney in a hallway, blood soaking through the bandages, waiting for anyone to help him. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Nurses walked past without stopping. But Sammy Davis Jr. was about to teach America a lesson it would never forget. This is the story of how Sammy Davis Jr. lost half his vision and gained something far more valuable. But most of all, this is the story of the friend who showed up, the one who didn't send flowers, the one who didn't send telegrams, the one who sent himself. By November 1954, Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't just talented. He was a supernova trapped in a jar. At 28 years old, he could do everything: sing with the soul of a blues man, dance with the grace of Fred Astaire, play drums like a jazz master, do impressions that left audiences gasping. He was the most gifted performer of his generation, perhaps the most gifted performer who had ever lived. And none of it mattered, because in 1954 America, talent had a ceiling, and that ceiling was the color of his skin. Sammy was the golden boy of a world that refused to let him shine. He could fill a room with white millionaires, make them stand and cheer until their hands ached. The moment the curtain fell, he became invisible again. He couldn't eat in their restaurants. He couldn't sleep in their hotels. He couldn't use their bathrooms. He was the most talented man in the room, and he was still nobody. There was one man who saw him differently. In Steubenville, Ohio, there was a kid named Dino Crosetti who couldn't speak English until he was 5. A kid whose father cut hair in a barbershop that fronted illegal gambling. A kid who learned to fight before he learned to read, because being Italian in a steel town meant being treated like dirt. They called him a dago. They called him a wop. That kid grew up to become Dean Martin, but he never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. He never forgot what it felt like to walk into a room and have people see your skin before they saw your soul. So when Dean looked at Sammy, he didn't see a black entertainer. He didn't see a cause or a charity case. He saw himself. Different shades, same lesson. 2 outsiders who had clawed their way into a world that didn't want them. 2 men who understood that talent was never enough. You also needed armor. That November, Sammy wore a mezuzah on a thin gold chain. Eddie Cantor, the legendary comedian, had given it to him months earlier. But Sammy couldn't know why Cantor had really given him that charm. He wouldn't understand until he was lying in a hospital bed, listening to an old Jewish comedian explain why suffering was sometimes a gift. On the night of November 18, Sammy finished his show in Las Vegas. He partied until dawn, then climbed into his lime green Cadillac and headed for Hollywood. He didn't notice the mezuzah sitting on his nightstand. He had forgotten to put it on. It was the only time he ever forgot. Route 66 stretched through the California desert like a ribbon of black asphalt. The morning air was cool as Sammy pushed the Cadillac through the winding curves of the Cajon Pass. The sun was climbing higher, painting the scrubland in shades of gold and brown. He was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones after a night of performing. The recording session was waiting, and Sammy Davis Jr. didn't cancel. He didn't disappoint. He didn't make excuses. He showed up. Sammy couldn't know that the worst part of this day wasn't the crash. It was what would happen at the hospital, what the ambulance drivers would see when they looked at him. The car ahead was moving slowly. A woman driver, apparently lost. Sammy didn't think much of it. Then the brake lights flashed red. She had stopped dead in the highway. Sammy's foot found the brake, but the distance was wrong. Too close, too fast. The impact wasn't catastrophic, but 1954 Cadillacs had a design flaw nobody talked about. The steering wheel had a chrome cone in the center, a bullet-shaped protrusion that housed the horn. Decorative, stylish, a spear aimed at the driver's face. When Sammy's body flew forward, his face met that chrome cone with full force. The world exploded into red. Charlie Head was screaming in the passenger seat. Sammy didn't hear any of it. He was somewhere else, floating in a sea of pain so intense it had transcended sensation. He felt his hands on his face, felt the wet warmth of blood pouring through his fingers, felt something fundamentally wrong with the left side of his skull. He couldn't see out of his left eye. He couldn't feel his left eye. There was just a socket of fire where vision used to be. The ambulance came. Sammy remembered hands lifting him, voices shouting, the wail of a siren cutting through the morning air. He remembered the sky above him, impossibly blue, and he remembered thinking, this isn't how it ends. Not like this, not on a highway in the middle of nowhere. The ambulance came, but when it arrived at the hospital, the paramedics didn't announce his name. They didn't mention that the man on the stretcher was one of the most famous entertainers in America. They just saw what they saw. Two black men, one bleeding, one scared. Sammy lay on a gurney at County Hospital, blood soaking through bandages, waiting for someone to help him. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects. Nurses walked past without stopping. Doctors glanced at him and kept moving. An hour passed, then two. The blood kept seeping through the bandages, and Sammy kept waiting. Finally someone recognized him, a young orderly who had seen him perform. Someone made a phone call, and suddenly, everything changed. Sammy was transferred to Community Hospital. Dr. Frederick Hull, one of the best eye surgeons in California, examined his face with gentle hands and a grim expression. The left eye was destroyed. It would have to be removed, but that wasn't what Sammy asked about. When the nurses prepared him for surgery, Sammy grabbed the doctor's sleeve. "Doc," he whispered, "how's my leg?" Dr. Hull stared at him. The question made no sense. "Your leg is fine, Mr. Davis, but your eye—" "I know about the eye." Sammy's grip tightened. "Will I be able to dance?" The doctor paused. This man with his face destroyed wasn't worried about seeing. He was worried about moving. "Yes," Dr. Hull said, "you'll dance again." Sammy closed his good eye. A tear slid down his cheek. "Thank God," he whispered. "I need my legs more than I need my eyes." The surgery took 45 minutes. When it was over, Sammy had a socket where his left eye used to be, and a career everyone assumed was finished. Everyone except Dean. The phone calls started before Sammy was out of surgery. Frank Sinatra called first, then Dean Martin, then Joey Bishop, Tony Curtis, Jack Benny. The hospital switchboard jammed with Hollywood royalty, demanding to know if Sammy was alive. Frank did what Frank always did. He sent his private plane to stand by. He offered his Palm Springs estate for recovery. He made calls, pulled strings, ensured Sammy would have the best care money could buy. Frank Sinatra threw money and power at the problem. He fixed things from a distance. Dean did something different. Dean didn't send a plane. He didn't send a check. He didn't send flowers or telegrams. He didn't call the press. He didn't turn Sammy's tragedy into a publicity moment. Dean sent time. The first day after surgery, Dean Martin walked into Sammy's hospital room with a bottle of bourbon and a deck of cards. No speech, no sympathy. He just pulled a chair to the window, sat down and started dealing. Sammy couldn't play. He was drugged, bandaged, barely conscious. Dean kept dealing anyway, playing both hands, keeping up a running commentary that filled the silence. "You know what the difference is between you and me, Smokey?" Dean said, using the nickname only he was allowed to use. "You lost an eye. I lost my liver 20 years ago. You're gonna be fine." Sammy tried to laugh. It came out as a groan. "See? You're laughing already. That's a good sign." The second day, Dean came back. Same chair, same window, same quiet presence. He told Sammy about a movie he was shooting, about nothing important at all. No mention of the eye, no mention of the future. He just sat there, filling the silence with easy companionship that couldn't be faked. On the third day, Eddie Cantor came to visit. The old comedian sat on the edge of Sammy's bed and took his hand. "I heard you forgot something," Cantor said softly. Sammy's hand went to his chest, to the place where the mezuzah should have been. "I left it at the hotel," Sammy whispered. "The one night I didn't wear it." Cantor pulled out another mezuzah, silver on a new chain. "This one stays with you, always." Cantor wasn't finished. He leaned closer. "You know why I gave you that first mezuzah? Because I saw a survivor. My people have been survivors for 3,000 years. Slaves in Egypt, burned in the Inquisition, 6 million murdered in Europe." Sammy listened, his good eye fixed on Cantor's face. "Your people know about survival too," Cantor continued. "Slavery, Jim Crow, we're the same, Sammy. They try to break us. They fail." That conversation planted a seed that wouldn't bloom for 7 years. Dean came back the 4th day, and the 5th, and the 6th, and the 7th, and the 8th. 9 days without a single absence. 9 days without a substitute. 9 days without excuses about filming schedules or other commitments. 9 days. 9 consecutive days. Dean Martin walked into that hospital room and sat in that chair by the window. He brought cards. He brought bourbon. He brought stories that went nowhere, and jokes that weren't particularly funny. He brought the one thing that mattered. Presence. Dean Martin, the king of cool, the man who famously kept everyone at arm's length, who built a wall of charm around himself that no one could penetrate. He lowered the drawbridge for Sammy Davis Jr.,
because Dean was the only one who truly saw. On the 7th day, Dr. Hull came to discuss prosthetics. Dean was there as always. "Mr. Davis, we can fit you with a glass eye that will look quite natural." Sammy turned to Dean. "What do you think, pal? Glass eye or eye patch?" Dean considered. "Eye patch is Sammy Pirate. Glass eye is Sammy Mystery Man. I vote mystery. Glass eye it is." Later, after the doctor left, Sammy took Dean's hand. "Dean, when the doctor told me about the eye, I wasn't scared. You know what scared me? The thought that I might not dance again." Dean looked out the window. "That's the smartest thing you've ever said, Smokey. Legs keep you moving. Eyes just show you where you've been." On the 9th day, Sammy was discharged. But before he left, he gathered the nurses and orderlies, mostly black and brown, the invisible workforce of a segregated system. "When you build a new facility, I'll be back. You have my word." The staff smiled politely. Hollywood stars said a lot of things, but Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't most of them. Aftermath. 6 weeks after the accident, Sammy Davis Jr. walked onto a stage in Las Vegas. The audience gasped when they saw him. He wore a black silk eye patch that made him look like a glamorous pirate. His face was still healing, still bearing the marks of trauma. His legs worked perfectly, and when the music started, Sammy danced. He didn't just dance. He didn't just go through the motions. He exploded across that stage with more energy, more precision, more joy than he had ever shown before. He danced like a man who had been given a second chance, and refused to waste a single step. Standing ovation before he finished. Tears streaming down faces. Grown men weeping. Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't finished. He was just getting started. His career ascended. Albums, films, the legendary Rat Pack alongside Frank and Dean. The eye patch became his signature, a symbol of survival. Eventually, he replaced it with a glass eye, just as he and Dean had decided in that hospital room. The mystery man had arrived. Sammy didn't forget his promises. He never forgot anything. 4 years later, on November 15, 1958, Sammy Davis Jr. returned to San Bernardino. The hospital staff had never expected to see him again. Hollywood stars made promises all the time. They said what sounded good, shook hands and disappeared forever. But Sammy wasn't like most of them. The Swing Auditorium was packed. 7,500 people had paid $5 each to see the greatest entertainers of their generation. Judy Garland sang that night. Tony Curtis was there, and Sidney Poitier, and Diahan Carroll. 3 buses full of Hollywood stars made the journey from Los Angeles. $20,000 raised in a single night, for a hospital, because Sammy Davis Jr. kept his word. Sammy took the microphone. The crowd fell silent. 7,500 people, waiting to hear what the one-eyed man from Harlem had to say. 4 years ago, I was brought to your hospital, bleeding, scared, nobody to most of the world, but the people here, the nurses, the orderlies, the doctors, they treated me like somebody. They saved my life, and I told them I would come back. He paused, his good eye scanning the crowd. I keep my promises, always have, always will. The applause was deafening, but Sammy wasn't finished. They say I lost an eye. They're wrong. I gained the knowledge that you don't need 2 eyes to see who your real friends are. He looked toward the wings, where Dean was standing, hidden from the audience. You just need 1 good eye, and an open heart.
In 1961, Sammy Davis Jr. converted to Judaism. Eddie Cantor's words in that hospital room had planted a seed. That seed had grown into a tree. The suffering that Cantor described, 3,000 years of survival, had resonated with something deep in Sammy's soul. "I'm a one-eyed black Jew," he would tell reporters with that famous grin. "If you want to talk about handicaps, you're looking at the king." For the rest of his life, Sammy kept a photograph in every dressing room. Not a photo of himself on stage. Not a photo with Frank or Dean or the president. A photo of a hospital bed in San Bernardino. "That's where I was really born," he would tell people. "Not Harlem, San Bernardino. Room 12. That's where Sammy Davis Jr. began." And next to the photo, on a small hook, hung a mezuzah. Some performers checked their makeup before going on stage. Some adjusted their costumes. Some said a prayer. Sammy checked his mezuzah every night for 36 years. He would touch it once, close his good eye and whisper something that no one else could hear. He never forgot to wear it again. When someone asked Sammy who his best friend was, he didn't say Frank. Frank had given him a house. Frank had given him fame. "Dean gave me something more important," Sammy said. "He gave me his time. In Hollywood, that's the only thing money can't buy." On May 16, 1990, Sammy Davis Jr. died. The throat cancer had taken his voice first. In his final weeks, he couldn't speak, couldn't sing, but he could still see. With his one good eye, he watched as the entertainment world gathered. Frank Sinatra was there, Michael Jackson, Bill Cosby, and Dean Martin was there. Dean, who had stepped out of the spotlight years earlier. Dean, who had retreated into grief after his own son Dino died in a plane crash in 1987. Dean, who barely went anywhere anymore. Dean, who had stopped performing, stopped appearing, stopped caring about Hollywood and its demands. Dean showed up for Sammy, just like he had shown up 36 years earlier, in a hospital room in San Bernardino, just like he had shown up every day for 9 days, with a bottle of bourbon and a deck of cards and absolutely nothing to prove. Some friendships don't need two eyes to see, they just need one heart that refuses to quit. Sammy was buried with his mezuzah. The undertaker later said that Sammy's right hand was curled around the small silver charm, as if even in death he was holding on to the thing that had taught him to believe. Not in luck, not in fate, in survival, in friendship, in the stubborn, beautiful act of getting back up when the world knocks you down. Sammy Davis Jr. lost an eye on a highway in California, but he gained something most people never find. He found the courage to keep dancing,